Hello and welcome. My name is Gerda Winkler. I'm a university librarian of the Free University of Bolzano in Italy, and I'm pleased to join you today in this session. Before we begin, we appreciate your patience and understanding as we are bringing this conference to both in-person and virtual attendees. Our colleagues from the University of Miami and Florida International University are working hard to make this a seamless experience for all. Please note this session is being transmitted via Zoom through FeedLoop. The presenters will have their turn presenting, and at the end of our presentation, we will begin the Q&A. Those viewing through FeedLoop, please feel free to use the Q&A function, and we will have our in-person FeedLoop moderator ask you a question on your behalf. I will introduce the speakers in speaking order, and they all will join us in person. Our first presenter is Michael Crumpton from the University of North Carolina in Greensboro, and his work is titled Anatomy of Renovation. For the second presentation, we have with us Kelly A. Miller from the University of Miami, and Bettina Moxnes from the Oslo Met University. Their work is titled Current and Emerging Space Priorities in University Libraries Across the Globe, an interactive participatory session with a special interest group on library space. So let's begin with Michael Crumpton, MLS SHRM SCP, is the interim dean for the university libraries and professor at the University of North Carolina at Greensboro. He is an affiliated faculty member for the Department of Library and Information Science within the School of Education and a certified senior human resources professional. He's the editor of the open access journal, the Journal of Learning Spaces. His published works includes 4 monographs as well as a host of chapters and articles found in his university's institutional repository. Please, Michael Crumpton, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Hope everybody enjoyed lunch. I thought it was great. Okay. I'm very happy to be here. It's my first one. And so I met Chuck and Ann and Shali at an ACERL conference. And so they told me about this. And so this has been great. So thanks for having me. North Carolina, for those of you that don't know, is north of here, probably 12 to 15 hours, depending on what part you go to. And we're going to talk about Greensboro in particular, which is right in the middle of the state. And we're a 17 school state. So that's a lot of universities, 17 universities in one state. But I am from Orlando. I grew up here in Florida. So this was the closest I could get to my Florida outfit, Chuck, for you. So what I'm going to do today is talk a little bit about the renovation process. And what I'm trying to do is share with you guys what I've been learning. So I've been in Greensboro for 15 years. And in that time frame, I've been putting together or patching together, let me say that, an old building. And it's an older building with a book tower that was built in the 70s. And so we've been patching this along, trying to get on the road to a renovation. And we're there. So that's what I wanted to kind of share with you, all the different pieces that made up that journey and in what we have to look forward to. And that's what the case study is about, just to show you some stuff from the planning that we've done so far. And then my last couple of slides are going to be about the Journal of Learning Spaces. It's an open access journal. I want to make you aware of it. So it's kind of a shameless commercial for that. So the first thing when you're looking at a renovation, and I'm sure a lot of you guys have already been through part of this, either full scale or in pieces as you needed to modernize certain spaces and things like that. But you do need to determine the need, because that's going to become the justification that's going to pass on up to administration and all your funding sources. And so a lot of it is cosmetic, a lot of it is technology, a lot of it is changing pedagogies within the university, changes to maybe even the mission and campus needs. So for example, we were a women's college, started in 1895. Somewhere in the 60s, we admitted men, and now we're a minority serving institution. So we've come full scale as a campus in terms of our mission. And so that makes a difference in who we are at the library. And then some of the expectations of how that space is going to be used changes along with these other things. So this is the big concept. These are all the different steps that come forth in anatomy of a successful renovation. And I've used this both on small scales as we've done some piecemeal renovations, but this is the plan that we're using going forward with the larger scale renovation of these buildings. So you got to start with funding. And I know that sounds obvious, but there's components to that make a big difference. In our state, sometimes funding is listed, is connected to commodity codes. So you can only do certain things if it falls into the right commodity. Sometimes it's going to be government support, in our case, the state. If you do a campaign and you're trying to get donor support, that sounds great, but to get really something useful, you have to have big chunks of donor support. And if you don't have that, it does complicate what you do going forward with a designer. And then if you have grassroots advocacy, meaning people out there that's trying to help support this and push it, and they want the library to be funded and move forward, that's helpful too, but it's got to be tied together in a cohesive way to make it useful. And space is expensive. So, I mean, we know that, because traditionally libraries are spending money to house collections. So you're becoming basically a warehouse. And so there's a lot of components to that have to start, the mindset has to start changing in terms of, it's not going to be about materials, but it's going to be about people. New technologies coming to bear, a lot of which what we're hearing about here in this conference have to have a place to go and connections to make it work. So the infrastructure needs become quite important to that. And then updating the furnishings as you go along makes a big difference. The next thing is an environmental scan. And some of you might, do this naturally, or just anywhere you go somewhere like here and going over and looking at the beautiful library here and things like that. You just get your second sense of what you want to go look at and get to know. But it's really important. You need to start with on campus. Your campus has competition in a way with your spaces in terms of what they're doing for students to pull them over to other departments or over to the student union or things like that. So you need to be aware of what's happening on campus with space. What kind of virtual competition is out there. So when we went through COVID 2.5 years ago, we transitioned a lot of things to virtual, as many of you did, I'm sure. And that created its own kind of competition from a virtual perspective. And so we're trying to make sure that we're staying in front of that. Some of the environmental considerations that you might run into is having spaces just for people to come in and study and learn, something that's comfortable, inviting. We still have people asking for quiet space. So it's not all about community, but community does play an important role in that. Spaces that serve as this gateway to accessibility, meaning connecting with the scholarly activities that need to be involved, whether they're electronic or not. And then that whole third space concept. I know that's kind of an older concept, but I'm a former retailer. I'll tell you that. I'm a second career librarian, and Barnes & Noble was one of my retail outlets. And that third space concept in a bookstore environment was significant in terms of what I've brought into the library and how we use that to the benefit of our stakeholders. That's the original book, if you're interested. I think the concepts are still valid about people having a place to go in their third space beyond work or beyond going home, or in a student's case, maybe beyond going to their dorm room or just having a place to go and disconnect from everything else. So, and it doesn't have to be expensive or exciting. It just needs to be something that's comfortable and connects with students. So then the approvals is your next step in this renovation. And once again, you've got to have that justification that goes up to your administrators. In our case, I'm very fortunate, our chancellor, where he's the one that all this was put in front of, that said, yes, the library is going to be our #1 priority. And so it's been, the project you'll see has been funded by the state now as the #1 capital project on our campus. But we also have a state construction. And I've been part of some IFLA conversations and groups that's talked about this. So I get the feeling that other countries have similar structures in terms of getting these approvals and having that hierarchy of bureaucracy to get things up and going. A code and zoning is going to be different no matter where you go, even in the United States. Different states have different codes and zoning situations. But you have to find out what those are. Your designers are going to help you with that, but you don't want to be asking for stuff up front that can't be done because of that. So programming is the big piece right here. So when you do get a designer on board, first thing you're going to do is start talking about what you want this space to be. Okay, you got some money, you got some approval, you're going to move it forward. So what do you want this to be? What services do you want to have? Who are going to be your stakeholders? What are the expectations that those groups are going to have for your space? And then what kind of information are you going to pull together to help justify how this goes forward? This is where, and I actually made some notes in Trevor's talk this morning, this is where you want to get in front of designers, that you want EDI spaces, or spaces that are accessible for everyone if you don't have them. We don't. Right now, we're struggling with some accessibility issues. And so that's the first thing that needs to be fixed in a renovation. And I mentioned we were a women's college. We still have a lot of reminders of women's college in the library. And so I've been doing what's called inclusive design. I've got a committee together, and we've started very subtly changing some of the old photographs or old pictures or old concepts into something that's a little bit more modern. And once again, my retail mentality turns it into simple graphics, simple wording. We created in the lobby of the library, the elevator lobby in the bottom floor, a bunch of graphics and a bunch of words about what we do, and books wasn't one of them. So we have a student group assessing that right now. And so I think they're struggling a little bit, kind of, well, is this really what we want to be? But that's part of it, is the whole assessment piece. Doing your research, it divides into two different kinds. Your secondary research is data that you pull from reports, running your enrollment system, things that you might purchase, field literature related to what's happening in the libraries, things that have been benchmarked. You guys know what that is. But the primary data is what localizes it for you, where you want to experiment with stuff or put together what ifs, for people to respond to. If you have any pilot projects, surveys, interviews, all these kind of things I'm sure you've done in a variety of different, for different reasons and stuff like that, but it can be really critical for your space planning. That's just an example of secondary data stats that you pull into the mix to have a conversation. And then your focus groups, that can be a lot of fun. Make sure you're feeding them. That's the big motivation kind of deal. And then assessment is important because, once again, that's providing data that helps justify some of the things that you're asking for. Site visits was one of the things that was most meaningful to me. So when we worked on a master space plan that was finished in early 2019, and this is where we got the information we needed to ask for the capital project. And so these site visits is what was significant. So in North Carolina State University, I have to give them credit. They're the big guys in town, and so they've done so much with space. And if you've heard of the Hunt Library, which you'll see a couple of shots in a minute, that's an engineering library that's about 6 or 7 years old now, but it's still pristine, modern, everything you want an engineering library to be. Their original library, Hill Library. So we went there on this site visit. This is a group of us. So kind of we had a donor, we had some faculty, we had some students. So there was a whole group of us that did these site visits. And these are some of the things that we saw at these sites. they had made a central service point there. It's adjacent to their maker studio, which was significant. They said they gave us reasonings for that because that was the most popular question. How do I get to the maker studio? And so by putting it next to access services, they were able to make that easier. They published a book. I don't know if you guys know that, on chairs. So they spent a lot of time and effort dissecting all the different kind of chairs and what people like and where the best place in the building to put them. They also started, these are called dirt walls. It's DIRRT, that's a brand name. But they started using these for both transparency and to get natural light through the building, but also to segment different sections of the building. And it made it look clean and orderly, because if it didn't, that was a flag for someone to go clean it up. They did bring that up in the conversations. There's Hunt, that big central staircase, which a lot of other places are using now. And on the left is also the use of whiteboards all over the place. And I've seen a lot of creative use for whiteboards in different venues. That stadium seating's got very popular. It's at Georgia Tech too, that we saw coming up. And then there was some faculty spaces that we saw that were accessible only by faculty with their IDs. And so I thought that was pretty interesting too, because it made them feel special. A couple of things here now on the left, on the right side, I have to just say we found that they did put some electricity in the floor, but then they didn't put the furniture over it like they should have. So you start learning things like that, and you look at another place and they go, oh, no, they could have done it that way. Overall service concepts were very interesting. The bottom photograph is from Virginia Commonwealth University. And so that we learned there that whole triage model of access services, because right now we still got that big counter. So I know that that's something that we're going to be looking at changing as we go forward. Also different vendor features. On the left, the reason I put this in here is we buy a lot of stuff from Steelcase. Well, that's a Steelcase product that I never saw. And so that, to me, what I learned from that is when you're talking to your vendors, don't let them drive it. You tell them what you want and ask for options. And then the other side is they had these setups were great study areas, but they were topless, meaning the sound was flowing out the top of them. So that made a big difference to the students that were using them. I put this in here because our chancellor, he wants a convening space in the new library. The biggest convening space we have right now is in the student union, and that's paid for with student money. So from a state perspective, he wants us to have a big convening space. And these are the things that have to go into that. You really have to have a catering kitchen in there because you're going to have food. You got to have the right kind of projection. You just got to have a lot of features that's going to make it multidimensional. Liberty University, which maybe some of you haven't heard as much of, is north of Greensboro. It's beautiful. I think that was a lot of donor money, but they've got a wide range of different levels of service pieces. Like, for example, they have a quiet area, and then beyond that, they have a double quiet area, which means the protocols to go into the double quiet area are even more stringent than go into the quiet area, which was kind of interesting. But they also have some, once again, signage, the service points, looking at that. The whole thing about Delta is ready when you are is a take on the airline slogan, tells you how old I am. But they had that kind of set up and that service model in the front of their mind. Natural daylight, it was a huge plus there. And so when we get to some renderings, I'll tell you why that was important. But the whole point about your space is it's got to be purposeful. You got to have reasonings behind it. So that's why you would want to do these kind of site visits, these kind of assessments, so that you're putting a purpose behind the spaces that you're designing. So your design is your next step, and this is where, you've got a designer on board. In North Carolina, we go through a state bidding process, which we did. We had 16 letters of interest. We narrowed that down to 4 for interviews. And then of course, 1 that's been awarded the design. And right now they're doing contract negotiation with the state construction office. But they've got to understand, you want to pick someone that understands you. that once again, they're not trying to do their own agenda, but they understand what your needs are and what you mean to the campus. We've also created an oversight committee, which is going to include representation from the designers, but it's also going to include representation from around campus. So we've already had a challenge on the expected amount of print materials that need to be relocated out of the tower. And what we don't have yet is we didn't have this oversight committee in place yet. So I was kind of on my own with these guys. And I'm like, give us time. We're going to put all this together. You're going to be part of the conversation, and then we'll make some decisions once we're all at the table. But this oversight committee can be very important from a transparency point of view and from making sure that people know what you're doing, but they also have a voice. So there is communication back and forth. Then you're going to have a design document that your designers are going to put together. And the way you want this to happen, and I've done this, we renovated a space to have environmentally controlled space for our archives and closed stacks. And this is the process we went through. They create a design, they show it to you and your stakeholders and or design committee. You tweak it, you ask questions, you get comfortable with what they're doing. They go back, make some changes, give it back to you. So you want that process to happen so that when they're done, you're not sitting there with something that you didn't have a chance to weigh in on or question or understand why they were putting things like that. And sometimes they're going to have a reason in a design document for doing something you don't like. And it's usually structural in nature. Or it's functional in nature or something like that. So they can kind of explain it to you and talk about whether or not there was any options or not. But once you've all got on the same page and agree, you can move it forward. We're doing a construction manager at risk program. And if you're not familiar with that, that's a person that's hired that's going to be the coordinator between the construction company, the designer, but it's really advocating for the owner. And the intention is to keep everything on budget. They did that with our nursing building, came in at budget. So we definitely need that. Then they're going to develop those construction documents. Once again, they'll flow them around and let you see them before they go to a contractor, just to help vet out any obvious stuff. And then you're there. The renovation is complete. You're going to have a punch list. Don't ever think you won't. Punch list can take a while, depending on what it is. This day and age, we're doing a music project right now in a single room, and we're having supply issues, which once again, I'm sure a lot of you are. But don't expect that to not happen, but it's going to happen. And then make sure that you are part of that punch list so that you understand those little details that have strung along after that. Here's a good resource. ACRO does have a LibGuide on building design resources. So just wanted to throw that in there. Real quickly to go through our path, these are some of the considerations that we had for our current project. We know that the print books are going to have to, something's going to have to happen, and I'm not going to speculate what yet. But the book tower, which is 9 stories tall, was built in mid-70s. It was actually expanded during the 1900s to accommodate more, and it's not ADA compliant. The bookshelves are only 2.5 feet apart, and the fire suppression system is non-existent and that kind of stuff. So we know that that's going to be a big problem. We also want to be that learning hub, the knowledge center of campus. And so we're already talking to some of the other departments, student service departments, about coming in, including the faculty, the University Teaching and Learning Center, having a representation there. And then another consideration is our staff. Do we need the same amount of space for our staff? So these are some of the things that we've been thinking about. Changing user needs, we've all been talking about that for a long time. And what I mentioned earlier, that it's not going to be collection-based, it's going to be user-based. So all of that's happening in terms of what goes on. This is just a list from previous assessments on what students really are asking for. And we used to be, so once again, campus changes, we used to be more of a commuter campus, and now they've risen the number of dorms and residential housing up to a point that we're more 50-50, and that makes a big difference in the library. Some reoccurring themes that come out of all these conversations. And you can just see some of the things we talked about, like the essential service points, the stadium risers, more use of glass so that the whole building is more transparent and natural light filtering through, and having a combination of spaces for the users, group, individual, active based. And then some general notes, you know, and a little one in here is like that, the skewer hand washing station. I'll just explain that. We saw in the site visits that special collections areas had a place to wash hands and had, you know, running water and stuff like that. And we didn't. So we figured out a way to get that in firsthand. So you'll pull some of it forward as you can before you wait for a big one. And just know that the space is limited. So you're not going to make everybody happy. I mean, that's the big thing I'm bracing myself for. But what you want to make happy is the students. You want to make good decisions that are going to impact your students and faculty in a positive way. And then remember, the library is a learning environment. So I think that's the other big thing, is to just keep track of those learning attributes and the stakeholder experiences. That's almost back to the third place. You know, what do you want people to feel as they come and go in the building? Keep your service standards up. That's important. Making sure you're addressing accessibility. This is the buildings, the older 1950 building, and then the book tower that was built in the mid-70s. So in our state, that's considered one building. If you remember the movie Towering Inferno, that connects it from a fire code. And that's made a big difference in what we could and couldn't do up till now. We are the center of campus, so that's not going to change. So that's great. And then the rest of this is just some diagrams. I'm out of time, so I'm just going to run through them real quick, just to show you some of the types of drawings you're going to see. This is for that environmentally controlled space that I was talking about in the archives. We were a women's college, so one of the code requirements when we updated that space was we had to add a men's room to the second floor. Thank goodness. Here's some concept designs. Your designer is going to start by just kind of putting things out in a conceptual way as opposed to specifics, you know, and then I'll drill down from there. Here's that typical tower book plan that's real close together. You can almost see that here on this drawing. Here's a refresh for the computer lab. So this is showing a variety of different types of furniture and structure to be more appealing to students. We did build a digital media commons in the lower level so that we could bring forward our makerspace activities. We've got green screen technology. We've got a presenter practice room, a gaming room. We've just started with some AI technology. But when we were starting this was how the designer put it together conceptually for us. And what you're doing here is you're looking at some of the adjacencies. We did a site visit on that too, to look at these other places around the Knoll Studio at Eastern Kentucky University. I'll give them a shout out. They kind of bore that concept originally. These were our motivators for the master space plan. This is what went to the chancellor that says, hey, make us a priority, give us some money. And they're all things that we just kind of talked about. This is what you get back from the conceptual design. That you can see that convening space there on the one side. You know, we made sure the chancellor was seeing that loud and clear. And they use these kind of things to project cost. So your architect will apply that to standard numbers per square feet in terms of what you're looking for, and that's how they get an estimate. We want a new entrance, and that's going to help us with our accessibility problem. And then we want those open spaces. We don't have that staircase through the middle like Hunt Library does or VCU does, Georgia Tech, but we do want some open, airy spaces that are more appealing. You want to make sure your branding is part of what you're doing. And so this is where I was going to tell you about the glass. So in this concept, we're replacing a lot of the concrete with fretted glass, which filters out the sunlight. And that if we can afford to get to that point, that will make a huge difference. So in conclusion, space is important. You guys know that. Okay, and it's just important to make sure that you're making the right decisions and going through the right steps. Part of what I wanted you guys to see, if you haven't experienced this, is just the process you have to go through, because it can be extensive. Here are some references. That book at the beginning is a new publication from the Chronicle of Higher Education, and it's great. So it costs a little under $200, but it's worth it just to read through and the value of the perspective that it offers. A couple of words about Journal of Learning Spaces. We're in our 11th year. We just recently published the volume 11.1. And we don't have a lot of library stuff in here. So this is about learning spaces overall. It's open access. No money passes hands. It's all volunteer work. I've over the pandemic, I'm losing peer reviewers and people to work on copy editing and stuff like that. So if you have an interest, please take a look, and if nothing else, sign up to get it. But if you're interested in getting involved, let me know. I'd be happy to get you in there. And I think that's about it. So thank you.
Thank you very much for this interesting presentation. We come now to the next presentation from Kelly E. Miller and Bettina Moxnes. Kelly E. Miller is Associate Dean of Learning and Research Services at the University of Miami Libraries. She previously held positions at UCLA Library and University of Virginia Library. 2013 graduate of the Leading Change Institute and a former Council on Library and Information Resources, postdoctoral fellow in academic libraries. She focuses on the transformation of library spaces and services in support of the educational mission. She has published articles about libraries in EDUCAUSE Review, Portal Libraries and the Academy, Archive Journal, and other journals, and she has presented on library space projects at such conferences as the Society of College and Urban Planning, EDUCAUSE Learning Initiative, and the Designing Libraries Conference. She earned a PhD and MA in Slavic languages and literatures at the University of Michigan, and a BA in Russian and English from Stetson University. Bettina Moxnes is an academic librarian working at Oslo Metropolitan University. She has a bachelor's degree in Library and Information Science from the Oslo University College of Applied Sciences and a master's degree in Information Science from the University of Copenhagen. She is currently working as a project coordinator for the planning of a new university library at OsloMet. She has presented on library space projects on former ITIL conference. So Kelly and Gry, the floor is yours.
So thank you. It's wonderful to be here with you today. Gry and I will be leading this session, so thank you for the intros. So we'll get started. Welcome to the Library Space Special Interest Groups program on current and emerging space priorities in university libraries across the globe. We are looking forward to what we hope is a lively hour of conversation. Actually, no, we know it will be a lively hour of conversation as we present and discuss information on topics related to library space design and planning. So first, we'd like to say just a word about so yes, we've called it here a participatory session because we're looking for input and comments from you. I'd like to say just a few words about the membership of our group. Gry and I are here representing a larger group of 5 members who have all contributed to this presentation today, even though they couldn't necessarily be here with us. So we'll be speaking on their behalf at certain points in the presentation. As we consider library spaces from different perspectives located in 5 countries around the globe, we are really seeking ways to talk about library spaces from an international vantage point. Although we do acknowledge that our viewpoints are currently oriented mostly to Western perspectives, North America, Europe, Australia. So in the coming year, one of the things we're looking to do is really welcome more diverse input from this diverse community and make sure that we're truly global. So in this program today, we're interested in learning about what is of importance to you in order to shape our future work, because our interest group exists for this whole organization. And so we've enjoyed learning from one another and getting to know one another, but now we're really interested in what would be most helpful to you. So these are some of the questions we posed to ourselves. So we'd be curious to see, do these resonate with you? But what are current and emerging space priorities in university libraries across the globe? What types of spaces are libraries developing or renovating? Are these priorities geographically or culturally specific? And then how might we learn from our global counterparts to improve our spaces and expand our thinking about them? So the goals and structure for today's session: foster international conversation in a more inclusive way. And in order to start the conversation, we'd like to share ideas about 4 topics. So planning and renovation, and we just heard a wonderful presentation about just such a topic, planning and renovation. The second one, emerging library space types. So what space types are you creating? I also want to talk a little bit about virtual library spaces, which have been particularly important in the pandemic period. And then finally, we want to talk about resources, and we heard about a few of those in the previous presentation as well. But what kind of resources are you finding useful as you develop your spaces? And one of the reasons we are so curious about this is we think there's an opportunity to build out resources on the IATL website. So. All right, and then finally, the major goal is to really gather your input. So I hope you're ready to share. So Gry?
Thank you. So our first topic is planning and renovation. And I will tell you about the planning of the new library of Oslo Met. But first, I will give you some background information about the Oslo Met, or Oslo Metropolitan University. So it is the Norway's 3rd largest university, and it has a student body of approximately 22,000 students and 2,000 employees. Oslo Met has 4 libraries and 2 campuses, one situated in the city center of Oslo and one just outside of Oslo. So the 3 libraries at the campus in Oslo are situated within a 5 minutes walking distance. And the university is growing, and the need for working space for students are increasing. An upgrade and refurbishing of the existing library's premises are also in need. And we also wanted to explore other ways to better utilize our resources. So a few years ago, the university library took the initiative to investigate possible solutions for the future library and made a report based on the findings. A decision was made to incorporate the 3 libraries and move them to new premises on the campus. The new library will move into an existing building at campus, housing a lot of student-oriented activities, and therefore a perfect location for the library. It will require major changes and modifications to the building before the library can move in. And the new library is planned over 3 different floors. So there will be a need for a new staircase and a lift, among other things, to better connect the different flooring. So the project started up last year in the autumn, and a project group was established consisting of a project manager, the architect, the managers of the library departments, and the university library director. and representatives for the students and employees. And the main task for this group has been working on the concept design for the new library. And we were asking ourselves, what kind of place should this new library be? And the group has been working closely with the architect on concept design. So the project has also been inclusive with great involvement of all stakeholders at Oslo Met. We have had focus groups with the students, and more than 20 workshops have been carried out with various topics, such as student services, employee services, research support, events, and technology. We have also organized workshops, seminars, study tours, and library visits for the library staff. The project group has also organized 2 seminars for all the stakeholders and invited speakers from other libraries to talk about their experiences from similar work and projects. We also invited the Dutch architect Art Vos, who has designed several libraries in Europe, to talk about the planning of a new library. So we have now finished the work with the concept design, and after this summer break, we will start the detailed planning of the library premises with placing the library services, the book collection, student workspace, etc. And the librarians and other stakeholders are involved in this work. So the plan and the concept design for the new university library is for it to be an inspiring, inclusive, inviting, surprising, sustainable, and modern library. A place with the best workspaces for the students, a place that have relevant services and the newest technology. A place and an arena for sharing knowledge and cultural dissemination. We like to say that we want the university library to be the heart of campus.
So thank you, Gry. So that was our first example, and then I'll offer a second one, and then we'll open the floor to you. So be thinking if there's a project that you're working on at your university that you'd like to share, or if you have follow-up questions for us. So here at the University of Miami Libraries, we are also working on a planning project. It's a master planning process. And we are working with the firm Shepley Bulfinch. Beginning in the fall of 2021, they began working with us to conduct a master planning process that lasted over an 8-month period. And this process is designed to produce a written plan that will guide future renovation and building decisions that the libraries will need to make over the next 5 to 10 years. The process has been holistic in that it considers all the libraries in the system, both the flagship library and the subject specialty libraries. It's also inclusive, involving all of the different stakeholders, students and faculty, library employees, university administrators, decision makers, and architects and facilities planners. We're also taking into consideration, of course, trends and also benchmarking, looking at our peer institutions and ensuring that we are remaining relevant and responsive. Ultimately, this master planning process is ensuring that we will make well-informed decisions about future renovations. So some of the stages of the process have included assessment, visioning with stakeholders, developing the plan itself, then refining the plan, making recommendations, and now we're in the period of reviewing the final report, which we're anticipating being delivered very soon. So among the library trends and topics that we've discussed are grand reading room design, themed reading rooms, spaces for ideation and creation, how to increase the visibility of collections and services. We've also talked about proximity to light and nature and health and wellness, among many other topics. Overall, this process has created opportunities for imagining the future of our libraries and opened up exciting new possibilities. And I want to acknowledge my colleague, Associate Dean Cheryl Gowing is in the audience here, and she's been leading the effort for us. So it's great that she's here to answer any questions you might have at the end of the program. But so we're looking forward to receiving the final report, and we think it's going to be the basis for many more conversations and more decisions going forward. So at this point, we'll just pause for our topic number 1, and we're just really curious about what types of space planning and renovation are you conducting at your libraries, and whether or not these projects are resonating with you. Sort of the final part of this is just if it would be interest in talking about this topic in greater depth in the next year or so. So if anyone either online or here in person has thoughts, this would be a great time to share.
Hi, I'm Valerie Minson from University of Florida. So we've done an assessment of student perceptions of ideal versus current space. And so we've been renovating our our quiet study floors of our science library, which is a very different approach to the redesigning of spaces of our collaborative spaces.
Oh, great. Well,
that's just a,
okay.
I don't know if there was a question that you had for us about that specifically, or just.
This is just great to hear about it. And you're also in our state of Florida. So we definitely probably need a road trip, if nothing else.
Oh, you reach out to me. I would love to show you around our libraries.
Great. Great. Well, that's great. So of course, student feedback and assessment is a critical issue as well. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Are there other projects or questions? Yeah.
I'm from Hamilton, Canada, so the road trip is probably not as feasible, possibly.
A longer one.
Yeah.
It would just be a little longer.
So McMaster, we're embarking on a master space plan specifically of our main library, humanities and social sciences. We did one for our entire system about 8 years ago, and it was very useful for some parts of our library system, but now it's too old to actually be actionable for our main library. The piece that I'm struggling with a little bit is the return from the pandemic. The students have returned and they're occupying the same space in largely the same way as they did when they left in March 2020. But the return of the staff feels so different, and it's still not 100% clear what it will look like. And I feel like where the greatest change will be is in the future of staff space. So I don't know if where you're going with that. I just feel that's the mystery to me.
Okay, thank you. So it sounds like a topic we could consider over this next year. So staff spaces in particular, reintegrating staff into spaces following this pandemic. We certainly are seeing that here at the University of Miami. And I know probably you've just named a global issue for us all. So thank you.
Just to build on that, I'm Kate Robinson from the University of Bath over in the UK. I dream of people investing in my space, and I am still dreaming about that and hoping to do something about it. But just to build on what's just been said, for me, our students are using us differently post-pandemic. I think there's that community coming back, possibly the academics looking a little bit more to sending them off to do stuff rather than standing in front of them, might have something to do with it. But I feel that we are still in a space where we don't really know what's going to happen yet. I don't know when the music's going to stop. I don't know what the curriculum is going to look like. I don't know if researchers will return to campus in the same way that they did before. And I think it could be a really interesting topic to explore, you know, that awful cliche, but what is the new normal? And I don't think we know yet.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing, right? To just name the uncertainty with which we're all dealing with. And how do you do space planning when you really don't know what factors are going to arise? So yeah, thank you. This has already been so fruitful. So student assessment, involving students more in depth on particular floors, and certainly naming uncertainty. We're taking notes. I should say, Gri and I talked about how are we going to capture all the ideas, and then we said, oh, it's going to be recorded. So we're going to be rewatching ourselves, painful as it might be, but we'll be rewatching to really listen to you a second time and discussing it amongst our group to see if we can tease out then topics that we'll work on for the next year. Okay, so let's dive, thank you for this help on the first topic. We'll dive into a second one. Oh, sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sort of blinded by the lights up here. So
No, I just,
that's my excuse.
I
Yep.
present a similar experience with my library and learning center at the Congress at Perth. For me, the most important thing when you transform a building and for students and for libraries is to accept to change your opinion after 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Because in my library, with the architects and with stakeholders, we produce some kind of rooms for students, for different kind of activities. And with the user's experience, after 2 years, 3 years, we decide to change the affectation of the room. And for me, the most important with your librarians, your team also, and the architect and the technical service of the university is that they have to accept to change some affectation, some type of rooms. And then when you have a project to build a new library, you have to be the more flexible as possible. As your team, as your colleagues, they have to be the more flexible possible, because if you have a rigid structure with a rigid team, there are no success.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'm just going to say yes, put a period on that. Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Oh, and some online topics?
I think there was another question on this side of the room.
Okay, great.
Or a comment.
Okay.
Donna Born-Tyson, Dalhousie University. We will be doing a massive renovation of the Killam Library, which is our big brutalist structure, something with a glass addition. But I just wanted to mention we're about to launch our Indigenous community space next week on National Indigenous Peoples Day. And this has been an interesting process because we've done it collaboratively with our Indigenous community. And so far, all we've done is really empty out a massive room. We took out our whole print reference collection, and it's a 2-story high ceiling. We have to spend $125,000 to get the ventilation improved so they can do smudging in the space, which is important. It's, you know, it's a cultural, spiritual, medicinal practice for them. We are calling it the Indigenous Community Room now, but we have 2 elders who are going to do a naming ceremony and name the space. And then we're really just leaving the space open for the Indigenous community to book it, use it as they see fit, do the programming with our Indigenous services librarian if they want. And then they're going to tell us what kind of furniture they want. We've just pillaged the library for furniture right now. So it's kind of a chicken and egg thing, because you don't want to do something for the community, you want to do it with them. But it means kind of a step forward and a step back and consultation, and then letting them tell us what the next step is. So it will unfold over the next few years, I guess.
Thank you so much. Well, congratulations. That sounds like a fabulous space. And it's actually a wonderful sort of segue into this next section, in which the first space we wanted to talk about, you didn't know that, but the first space we were going to mention is actually a culturally safe space. So.
Yes, so I'll be giving you an example from our colleague Sam's library at the University of Adelaide. So one example of an emerging library space type is culturally safe space. The space at the Bar Smith Library at the University of Adelaide offers a space of cultural safety for Indigenous Australian students on campus, and provides an interactive and engaging area to showcase Indigenous collections, arts, and events. The goal for this space is to establish a central location for students to meet, engage, and connect. And the space features furniture and design features by indigenous artists and designers who adopt a modern approach to artwork and design whilst incorporating traditional customs, language, and meaning. Similar cultural spaces exist at 2 more of their library sites.
So in this section, we're just going to name 3 space types and then open it up to the floor to see if any resonate with you. We already know that one does. The second one we want to mention is a meditation room, which was mentioned earlier in the day as something that can help with inclusivity and building belonging. So here at the University of Miami Libraries, we have a meditation room that's a dedicated space in the library for the purposes of meditation, prayer, contemplation, and reflection by individuals or small groups. It's located in Richter Library on the 2nd floor. Richter is the largest of our University of Miami libraries. And this meditation space, it's a modest one, but it's the first such space in our library system. So a small pioneering space. It was created in conversation with various stakeholders on campus, including Student Affairs, the Chaplains Association, the Muslim Student Government Association, and the university's Mindfulness Initiative, which we'll be talking about a little bit more on Thursday. Guidelines for using the space are described in a online policy, and related to this space are programming, mindfulness programming and mindfulness resources that the library purchases and makes available. And during the pandemic, program offerings were offered virtually and continue to this day. So the third space, before we open it up to comments and questions that we wanted to name, has been contributed by our colleague at Tomsk State University. And that's a courtyard space, an outdoor venue. And Veronica Schubert let us know that this outdoor venue, which is located adjacent to the library building, is open to the public from May to October. The rest of the time, the weather does not permit outdoor activities, of course, because they're in Siberia. So I got a chuckle that we're sharing an outdoor venue image from Siberia here in Miami. But the space offers the library the opportunity to host festivals, outdoor lectures, and even music concerts. And during the pandemic, graduates were awarded their diplomas here, and the space became an excellent and safer alternative to the interior halls of the university. The space is included in the booking system of the research library and can be booked by students and university staff. So we're really curious. These are 3 we thought up about what were happening in our libraries, 3 space types, but we're curious, are there ones that you'd like to see larger discussion of in the IATL community, or ones you'd just like to tell us about today?
One of the things I started hearing about pre-COVID, not so much since, are family spaces in academic libraries. So that's another area. As we get a wider spectrum of students coming back to the academic environment after changing careers, and more students, having families, and how do you accommodate that? I know here we have a juvenile collection, which is primarily used by frantic student parents, trying to pacify their kids while they're in here studying, as well as obviously the education program. But I'm curious whether that's a growing area in any of the other libraries.
Great, thank you, Cheryl. So family spaces for different age groups, and particularly maybe students who may have children or families. Great, thank you, Cheryl.
We've been chatting to our neurodiverse community at the university and talking to them about spaces that suit them. Now, clearly there's a massive diversity. Some of them are around ones where there are not sensory distractions, so things a little bit more where you can really focus and make the space your own. Others are where it's permissible for noise to be more part of what you're doing. And so 2 very different things there, but trying to design that in, and something that gives permission to be how you wish to be in those spaces, so that people are aware of what spaces are available and can make informed choices.
Great, thank you. So spaces where students can really focus, and spaces that they might customize or users might customize? Thank you. Joan?
My perception is that at first, in response to needs and requests from specific campus groups, there were prayer spaces in libraries. Then there were meditation spaces in libraries. And what I see evolving perhaps are wellness spaces that might encompass an even broader set of needs. And I don't remember what one is called at the undergraduate or the Moffitt Library at UC Berkeley, but I think that may have this broader idea. But I also saw one that it might have been called a wellness room in the School of Business at York University in Canada. And the interesting thing about that was that they also had a program where students from, I don't remember if it was the School of Nursing or social work or something, were on duty for certain hours of the week so that they could provide counseling services or direct people to various support services on campus.
Thank you, Joan. Great. So wellness spaces more broadly. Yeah, absolutely. That's a huge topic and certainly very growing here at the University of Miami, we know. Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm Shali Zhang, Dean of Libraries at Auburn University. Yeah, you talk about some other spaces here. And at our libraries, since I think that 1 year ago, when we know the university required every instructional classes and everything else would be back in person. In order to help our library and library faculty better teach and with better social distance, everything. So we expand several instructional classrooms in the same floor with technology interaction, meaning that one classroom used to host 30 people, we divide them to 2 separate rooms. But one instructor teaching the particular room, other students in another room can also directly interact with the instructor. Actually, instructor can walk around to 2 different rooms to help out. We are hoping that right now in the last stage, upgrade all the technologies and everything else. We are hoping to finish that before fall semester start. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So different types of teaching spaces too. Thank you. I know more and more of our libraries have those, so that's great. Yeah.
We heard at this side of the room about the child-friendly or the family-friendly space. I know in Canada, there's been a bit of a push to become identified as age-friendly universities. And what that means is welcoming older people onto campus, because the recognition is we're all getting older. The demographics of the population in Canada and the US is aging rapidly. So we have to be prepared to welcome more seniors as students and as community members. So I think that's another thing to think of. So both ends of the age spectrum.
That's so, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I know all of those,
Yes.
all of us who are aging really appreciate that, especially.
A last example for me, in my university, I suppose it's the same in the other university, we push the student to create, when they are at the end of semester, to create their own company, their own enterprise, startup, spin-off, there are different names. But in my library, there is a strong request for the students, and then we create a new room only dedicated to students that have the project to create a new enterprise, a new company. And actually we have 3 groups of students. They could book this room and not the other, but they have rooms, they have a sofa, they have tables in order to receive a future customer and to discuss with other engineers and to create the projects.
Wow, thank you. Yeah.
It's not original.
So there's a thread here around different ways to engage students in the process. So that's very exciting. Yeah.
You don't know what you have open for. No, but I think it's interesting that all the spaces you have mentioned as special rooms, they are for people. Nobody have demanded a special room for books. And so the overall question or answer what sort of spaces do we need? We need spaces for people. And that has been surprising in Norway. As Gry said, we have visited some new libraries, and 2 of them, rather small libraries with some few, very little room for students. Most of the students were outside the library. They were very satisfied with that solution. And I was thinking, but we will have books for many years, but it will decrease. So the library shall end up with only an office with some librarians. So we need the students, and the students tend to say that they like to work in the library where they meet other students, where they meet staff, where there are always some grown-ups at home. So it's for people. But I have we are discussing some ideas. In the university, we have labs for engineers. We have lab for nurses. We educate kindergarten teachers. We educate librarians, also children librarians. So we have children books. I want to have a children library lab. Yeah.
Thank you, Lars. So that was very rich. So I had an image of the books sort of weeping, not feeling included in our conversation. So thank you for naming that. All right. So, hi, Christina.
Hi, I'm Christina Favretto, University of Miami, and I'll also make a plea for books. I work in special collections, and we teach many classes using both books, manuscripts, or ephemera, etc. Lots of materials, and students love them. We teach over 70 classes a year using these materials. So I'd like to see libraries that not only honor the book, but honor the craft of the book as physical object and the bookmaking, and see libraries that also maybe have printing presses, space for learning papermaking, marbling, etc., so that there is this kind of soup to nuts. Yes, we have the physical book, we have the technology, we have spaces for digitizing the materials. So there's a creative space, because if we're also respecting the history of the book, and I want to say the longevity of the book, because technologies come and go, but physical books stay. I really think that that's going to be a more visionary way to look at the future of libraries, rather than just like, let's put the books in storage and make it all kind of people-y. So yeah, I'm making a plea for books as well.
Okay, thank you, Christina. That's wonderful. It's a different kind of maker space then, yeah.
So as a science librarian, I think the books are sort of going out. So I'm sort of counterpoint to that, in that our books were a little dry anyway, so we can send those out of the building. But I do think that we need to be able to connect with our special collections and really highlight the historical unique material that is that is stored and preserved in those libraries. I've also seen, visiting, I think Iowa, they had a fabulous, the music library had a fabulous music room where they had keyboards with headphones that the students could practice music on. And it got the music students into the building in a way that was very creative. I mean, I just think I had never thought about that for a music library before.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. These are wonderful. It's making me realize what rich conversations we could be having around these different space types. So this is exciting. Okay, so I know I'm conscious of our time, so I'll move us on to topic number 3, which is virtual library spaces and programs. So during the pandemic, we realized that a number of our libraries were being pretty creative in this space. So.
Yes, so I'm going to give you a couple of examples from Australia. And the first example is from Australia. The University of Adelaide Library created a digital twin of the Bar Smith Reading Room to give users a virtual tour experience. Created using 3D technology, this immersive experience included an exhibition detailing and history of this impressive library, as well as the architecture, artwork, and inscriptions displayed within the reading room. It is still a very popular study area for students today. And the next example is where the age-old library tour has been transformed into a contemporary self-guided activity using a mobile phone app that is scalable, sustainable, and available to users just in time. Using a scavenger hunt app called Goose Chase, the library team at the University of Adelaide created a self-guided library tour for each of their 4 libraries. This approach provided a powerful active learning platform that was also fun for users. And on the screen there's a typical list of missions that the users will complete on the tour.
And we have one more example of this topic from Tomsk State University, and the library there created a mobile app that the libraries also administer, and it's used by students to find a conversation partner for foreign language learning. And the program actually matches students up to other students, and then the library has an in-person program 1 day a week where students can come in on Language Wednesdays and meet with their language conversation partner. So we were intrigued by this example. So we again wanted to open up the floor and just see, are there virtual library spaces and programs that are being created at your libraries that you would like to see part of this larger conversation around spaces and space design? Or synergies between them, which is also really interesting.
So this won't apply to everybody maybe, but at Dalhousie, we run the learning management system.
Mm-hmm.
And all of the associated different tools. So we created a virtual drop-in room for faculty. And before that, we used to have, before the pandemic, we had a physical space where people could come twice a week, and it was sort of a community of practice. But this virtual drop-in where you are immediately, like there's somebody sitting there waiting to pounce on you when you walk in to the virtual space, the faculty really love it. And they're even popping into this virtual space from a classroom, like while they're teaching a class, either an online class or a real one, they're dropping into this thing going, help. And so that's been our most successful service type space that we've created virtually.
Thank you. That's fabulous. I imagine many of us are paying close attention to this idea. Thank you. So the last topic and how we'll close our conversation today is that we are collecting resources, toolkits, ideas for conference attendance, publications, and gathering them with an eye towards being able to share them, or at least a list of these resources on the IADL website. So one of the areas that where we're gathering resources is learning space toolkits. And there are now versions of these kits available not only in the US, but in the UK and Germany. And again, very conscious of the fact that this is North American and European centric, but we're interested in what other communities might be using in the space planning category, and then how we might expand it and diversify these types of resources. So then we've also collected some titles that we've been reading or are anticipating reading. So again, a plug for this upcoming book, Designing Libraries for the 21st Century, that's going to come out in the fall, that's edited by Joan Lippincott, Tom Hickerson, and Leonora Crema. And we also are gathering inspirational websites. So our colleague in Germany shared library buildings in Europe as a site that you can explore if you're trying to get ideas about library design. as you're planning your library spaces. Then we're also thinking about what conferences and organizations do we need to be paying attention to and connecting with. And so we're compiling a list here that I'm sure here these are just a very few ideas, so it's not meant to be exhaustive in any way, but just start the conversation. So top of the list is the Designing Libraries 9 conference that's going to happen at Temple University in Philadelphia in November. And we now have the dates as of today, which is November 6th through 8th. So I know a number of us attending this conference might be interested in coming back to the US, to Philadelphia to attend that. But there are also other larger conversations happening around college and university planning. The SCUP conference is one I've attended before and learned a lot from. There are also conferences and related organizations in Europe and more globally. So we'd love your thoughts and ideas about what we might add. Again, really tried to crowdsource information that would be useful. So this I might just say, if you have resources or ideas here, you could contact Gry or me or catch us later in the day and let us know. But we'll be compiling this list and growing it over time. So what will we be doing over this next year? Well, the first thing we're going to do is watch the recording, talk about it, listening for the threads that have emerged just in the conversation today. But our hope is really to be expanding the conversation, and we are just trying to determine what those conversations, how they might take shape over this coming year. We have a tiny application process, not very weighty, but if you'd like to become a new member of our organization, of our special interest group, you're welcome to apply. And again, we are hoping to diversify our group and expand it. So thank you for all your input and ideas. And I know we're excited to be talking with you about these topics over the coming days. If you'd like to reach out to us, here's our contact information. And we look forward to continuing it. Okay.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Gry, for your wonderful presentation and for sharing with us all these ideas and activities. Now I want to invite you to do questions also for our first presenter, Michael Crumpton. Have we any questions in the audience?
Thank you. This is such a great session. I've got so many questions. But the one I'd like to ask Michael is, you talked about inviting others in. And I'm a little nervous about that because I worry about whether it will dilute the library's brand in some way, or whether someone might kind of take over the building and suddenly it doesn't feel like a library anymore. But I think I'm being paranoid. And I just wondered if you could share your thoughts with us.
No, that's not paranoid at all. That happens. So we've already been through that with some of the master space planning. You get a long line of people that want to come have the conversation and make their case for being part of the library, which is great, but there are limits. So I would say that the way I've navigated that so far is kind of having some authority behind me. For example, the provost, to just say, we can't be everything to everybody. We have to prioritize it. And then that's the message that goes back. You know, if you're making a case to be in the library, tie that to something else that we're doing or something else others are doing. When we go into the design phase coming up, I'm already going to put that in front of the architects, because I want to hear what people want in the library, but I know we can't do everything. I mean, our money's already limited from what we need to do. So I don't want the open ask. What do you guys want? You know, that's the problematic. So it's got to be framed in a cone of possibility. But it's a legitimate concern, because I got a call 2 months ago from the UTLC, which is the faculty development group. You know, have you got my space ready yet? well, no, we haven't designed it yet. But, he was serious. So, I mean, the mindset is that, they know this is the new thing on campus and they want to be part of it. So that's a good paranoia.
Other questions?
Yeah, I think I tried to be early, so my mic is still on the microphone. Quick question for him. He talked about rearrange during the renovation, redesign period of time for the staffing space, because we are right now also based on the strategic plan, create organizational excellence to give people better work environment. We are doing technical service people's work area, and I want to see some good ideas for how to, during the renovations period of time, how to get a space, different space for staff. Thank you.
No, that's a good question too, because that's something that's changed with the pandemic. So prior to the pandemic, when we were doing that initial master space planning, there was a big focus on staff space, is to make it a quality space, make staff comfortable and feel like they've been given some attention in that area and stuff like that. But what's happened on campus is, because campus has grown and not being able to accommodate everybody equally, they've started moving some non-public departments off campus, into other spaces. And so that's already been discussed with us. Tech services was one of them, or electronic resources, or something that's non-public facing could go into a different type of building. And you're obviously still connected, because now we know how to do that better virtually. But that way your other space is available for public facing spaces and services and needs. So I think that's the way it's going to go. I just haven't told them that yet.
Thank you for your, thank you to our presenters and to our audience, both in person and virtually. The recording for this session will be made available via Feedlog the next day. Please join us for the next keynote from Hilary Honoho, beginning at 2:45. Thank you.